Today on the Camera Journal podcast, we are joined by Richard Spegal. He is a writer of Eternal Nights, two books, Eternal Nights and the Wolves and Ravens trilogy, which being a trilogy is more than one book. Um, he has spent most of his life as an officer in the Pennsylvania National Guard, and now he is out of that, and he's writing wonderful books. He followed some of the best advice about writing. He didn't find the type of books he was looking for on the shelf for adult readers, and he took to pen himself and wrote it himself. So we're going to learn all about his journey and what inspires him and all this sort of thing. So welcome, Richard, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to move the microphone closer because right now it's all the way across the desk, and that does us no good over there. It's also on the wrong type. There we go. We were doing a watch along for another show, and so I had it on the big capture the whole room. We don't need that right now. So let's dive in right into the chat. Why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself and your writing?
I've been writing off and on since high school, really, and I didn't start publishing things until a few years ago. When I
Mm.
started, I had a lot more time, so I started putting more into the writing. I joined the military right after high school. I was active duty for a little while, and then after that is when I went into the National Guard and got my commission. I just retired this past February. I just retired.
Mm.
So putting more time into the writing and relaunching my books and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, excellent. Well, tell us a little bit about them, plots, characters, anything you want to tell us. Give us a little peek into the world.
Eternal Nights is they classify it as paranormal or occult because the protagonists are vampires, and that is the two books that are out are the prequel. You know, some world building, answering some questions and things like that, introducing all the characters, and then the main Eternal Nights series is going to start getting published in spring of next year, where it's going to be science fiction setting. The Wolves and Ravens is pure fantasy. I classify it as dark fantasy. So there is a trilogy there. The third book is going to be getting released in a couple of weeks, actually. And I would say both of the series, I generally say they're intended for more of a mature adult audience, just because of the concepts that are explored, the brutal detail that everything is written in. Generally, people with more life experience can connect a little bit better to the kinds of things that are going on, and that they can handle it a little bit better as well.
No, no, that's very interesting. What inspires you? What got you into writing these types of stories? What did you enjoy reading first? That were kind of like, I could do that.
I always was like a big avid reader. As far as inspiration, I don't know. Like the ideas just keep coming to me, whether I want them to or not, and so I just write the stuff that pops up into my head.
No, fair enough, fair enough. That's very helpful. Are you still reading a lot, reading anything interesting lately?
You know, honestly, not lately. I've noticed that ever since I started heavily writing, it's a lot more difficult for me to read other books because I can't keep myself from being critical. Like I can't just read for enjoyment anymore. My brain, it just keeps picking out errors and stuff that I might have done differently and things like that. And it's just not fun for me like it used to be.
Yeah, no, that definitely. Having done a graduate degree in creative writing, I very much understand. Like, oh, did you get through it? No, I put it through halfway down, couldn't take it anymore, sort of thing. So it's it's very understandable. Your other series, the trilogy, let's talk about that a little bit. What's it about? Give us a little taste.
Wolves and Ravens is a trilogy focusing on a dark fantasy world where the individual races are still recovering from a massive war that came close to exterminating everything. But the war ended in a strange fashion, and even like 1,000 years later, they don't really know the races don't really know what they are, and the majority of the book is answering questions like what really happened, what's the true history, and things like that. and there's a lot of influence from both sides, celestially speaking. You've got, celestial beings are kind of like watching what's going on and trying to decide what to do about it. Then there's demons that are kind of behind everything, and it keeps building up to where they end up having like massive battles trying to figure out things, trying to convince other people when they do fit when the main characters do kind of figure out some answers. And
Yeah.
then um, the entire time through the book, like I said, that they're trying to answer questions and things like that, but a lot of the answers they come up with are wrong, or at least not entirely complete. And one of the main protagonists, even though it looks like they're fixing things and things are getting better, it's actually making everything worse, which doesn't become completely evident until the third book, which is getting released, like I said, in a couple of weeks. And that's where things just get completely out of hand because, well, it's the final conflicts, basically. And the reason for the conflicts are basically consequences of one of the protagonist's actions because she doesn't really think things through. So like I said, while it looks like they're having victories, all they're really doing is making things worse. The books explore a lot of really bad concepts because of the stakes that are involved, going up to and including things like rape, crucifixion, suicide, stuff like that. When you're dealing with the stress that all of the characters are undergoing because of like the massive things that they're trying to do, and then they suffer for that stress. And I explore that in the same brutal detail that I explore everything else in. And I try to make it as realistic. I always try to make my writing as realistic as possible with it still being fiction.
Hmm. Yeah, no, no, that's a very interesting weaving of plots and ideas where the main characters we believe in are winning, but they're making their society worse. That's you don't find that very often in literature today. That type of dynamic tends not to enter in very much. But that's one of the things I love about fantasy. Sort of thing, especially written by people like yourself, is you get actually innovative stuff happening, rather than the sort of stock bog standard
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, no, that's very good. Now, kind of a funny question, but I imagine that given your experience, anytime the characters are fighting in any sort of battle, it must be incredibly very realistic and accurate given your experience and all that sort of thing. So, how does your many years in the military affect your writing?
I would say it helps to make a lot of the action scenes more realistic because I get down, like I said, like I get down into brutal detail. So it's not simply like, oh, this battle's happening. I get into the detail of what the individual characters and groups are doing, and having some military experience helps me to write that a little bit more realistically, and both in the conversation. It comes out a lot more in Eternal Nights because Eternal Nights is not a fantasy world; it's set in like the normal world. So the stuff that they're doing and the equipment that they're using is the same thing that's available today. So I'm able to use the military experience has a little bit more of a direct impact on that because of like the formations, the dialogue, the weapon systems that they're using. In Wolves and Ravens, it's mainly just the overall battle formations and things like that. And then, well, the reality of warfare, like the effect that it has on the characters and how like the glorification of what's going on is really inaccurate to what people truly feel after the fact.
No, no, I imagine so that would be the case. Let's get into writing process a little bit. Are you a planner? Are you an outliner? Or do you just kind of write as it comes?
I used to be an outliner when I wrote the very first book, Redemption, because it had to set up an entire series. So, characters had to get introduced, world building had to happen, and things like that. But after that book, it's almost like there's no point in me planning anymore because every book I write turns out completely different from what I expected. Origins, the part two for the Eternal Nights prequel, I spent forever trying to decide exactly how I wanted that book to go. And then once I wrote it, I ended up writing a completely different book than the one that I had planned because the importance is having real characters. And when you have real characters and you let those characters do what they want, then everything grows organically. So the plot that you sorry about my dogs barking in the background.
No, it's okay.
So the a lot of times the plot you might come up with, the characters disagree with it. And what happens usually in entertainment is they force the characters into the plot rather than letting the characters create their own, which is how you get immersive entertainment. It's writing 101. The characters drive the story. But it's so simple. But it's something that hardly anybody ever does anymore. That's why everything flops these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea of sort of character driven, I mean, that's definitely not as present as it once was. I think because well, there's a couple reasons for that. One, I think story driven is easier to write. And two, the studios love it because if they want to replace an actor or whatever have you, they can. The Marvel universe is notorious for this. you know because and that's why it has not produced any movie stars, but the studios like that because they can swap Robert Downey Jr. out of Iron Man and into elsewhere, and it works in the Marvel universe because it's not driven by any one character. It's entirely serving a greater story. So it is a disease of our age.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So what made you leave outlining behind and become a pantser and just write it as it comes?
Well, when my outlines weren't working anymore, there are certain things that I outline a little bit when it comes to stuff that has to get explained, like how I
Hmm.
want to introduce like a concept without it just being like pure exposition. So like there's certain things that I do want in the book that I have to sprinkle around everything else. So I'll outline that a little bit and the basic idea of like what has to get covered in this book. Like these things have to get covered in the book, and I just let the characters cover it in an organic fashion to them rather than forcing it into the outline that I made.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that definitely makes a lot of sense. Which do you think is easier, better, faster? Do you find it's easier and faster without the outline now?
Yeah. I can't stop the ideas. I mean, my brain is outlining things whether I want to or not. I keep fleshing out plots and storylines and things like that, again, whether I want to or not. So by the time I actually start typing, the book's pretty much already written in my head anyway.
Oh, okay. That's very, very, very helpful. I always ask because I've been running sort of an informal poll of writing guests who come on the show. And I'm trying to see which one kind of wins out. And Pansing is winning by a mile. You're the first person who was a former outliner and then went pantser. I've had a couple pantsers that have become outliners, not the other way around. But people just tend to write it. They don't tend to plan a lot in advance, which I think is very interesting. At least people that come on this show. So anyway, that's why it's an informal poll. But so it's always kind of fascinating to find out. Now I know you do fantasy and paranormal and all this type of things. I don't imagine there's a ton of research, but how do you prepare these moments, these spaces? Do you work them out in advance or do you let them grow organically?
Well, with the fantasy, one of the reasons why I had so much fun with that is since the whole thing is fantasy, I don't have to really do much research. I can kind of do what I want because it's fantasy. So I had
Right.
a lot of fun with that. With the Eternal Nights, there's more research involved because it's the normal world, so things have to make sense. And then with the science fiction that's going to be coming out, that's a massive amount of research, and it's one of the reasons why I took a break and wrote Wolves and Ravens because the 2 years that I spent writing Wolves and Ravens, I also spent researching for the full Eternal Night series. Because when it
Mm,
comes to science fiction, I mean, you might spend 20 or 30 minutes of research for a single sentence to make sense. Because
right.
yes, it's science fiction, but still there is science that can be accurate based on what we know today. And authors that don't take the time to research their background, the background world doesn't make sense, and it takes away from the immersion because it's just like, wait, none of this makes sense. So I'm not able to enjoy the characters as much.
No, that is true. And people, especially clever readers, will always point that stuff out. And
Oh
there's
yeah.
always a clever reader. There's always inevitably, there's always somebody somewhere who, asks some small question about some small thing. So
Yeah, well, because
it's
consistency and continuity are extremely important because, like I said, some people will pick up on that stuff. And it's really important when you're writing a series because you might write something in book three that the last occurrence or the last time that character was named was in book one. And if you forget, well, that's why even characters that have no time at all, I write out families and professions and things like that. So that way, if this character comes back in two books and mentions his wife, it's the same name that he mentioned in the first book. And
right.
a lot of authors screw up their continuity. Some of the most popular authors of the 21st century who's like they're record setting, but their books also have massive numbers of errors because they don't um, they don't continue properly book to book.
No, no, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. I agree. I have a fantasy project I'm working on right now that's kind of steampunk. It's set in the 1940s, maybe early 50s in our time. And it's a I struggle sometimes with secondary characters like that where it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to introduce the characters that are going to be around for a short bit of time, but they are so necessary. Because social context is very important, helps build the world. It makes it seem like, the environment is full and rich, sort of thing. So that's quite good. I do the same thing. I have a full cast list. I even do Enneagram numbers. Really figure out kind of who these people are, which is why sometimes I think I hesitate to introduce those secondary characters because I want to go really fill out this person. It's like they're here for a chapter and then they're going off, sort of thing. But you're absolutely right. It does make the world feel more full. So I totally get that. Let's talk publishing journey. Are you agent traditional, self-published? Are you working with a company? Are you going on your own? How's that working?
It kind of a hybrid of both. I started out self-published, but I'm working with companies now that it's kind of like some self-published, but they do a lot of marketing and stuff for you. So like my publisher runs my website, and
Mhm.
because I made my own website and I thought it was good, but then I saw the website that my publisher made. I was like, wow, my website looks like crap. So I scrapped the one that I did myself, and I let them manage the one for me because they have like video trailers, which is pretty cool to have a video trailer for an actual for a written book.
Mhm.
They loaded a bunch of behind the scenes videos for me, things like that. They're managing my social media because I don't know how to do any of these things. So it's a lot easier when I can just focus on the writing and not have to worry about a lot of other stuff.
No, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. Oh, excuse me. I thought I was gonna cough and then it didn't happen, but then kind of did. Whatever. Bodies are weird. No, that makes sense. As someone who's done it all myself, I definitely feel that. And we love a good hybrid program. I run a hybrid program, so we definitely do love a good hybrid program. I certainly I certainly appreciate that. So you said that there's a science fiction book coming. I don't, is that still in the Eternal trilogy or is that something else?
Yeah, that's the Eternal Night series is going to be science fiction. The first two books were simply
Oh,
there as
okay.
a prequel to
Right.
get some questions answered and kind of set up the series. And now that the Wolves and Ravens trilogy is done, I'm going to start releasing the science fiction, the main Eternal Night series. The first one should be released in spring of
Mm.
2026. And then after that, it'll be however often my publisher says. I've been told that it's bad business to publish books as fast as I've been publishing them, that I should wait for more time in between. Because I've got five more that are on my computer that are just waiting in line. And I
Yeah.
wanted to publish them all at once, and my publisher's like, no, that's stupid. So I was
Yeah.
like, all right,
No,
whatever.
you need to give people time to buy, time to read, time and
Yeah.
then to buy the next one. And yeah, it's the fastest pace I've ever heard of, and I think it's David Baldacci. He releases 2 books a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. And that's considered an aggressive publication schedule.
Yeah, I
Um,
did that only because it was the different books of different series. But now, like I said, now that Wolves and Ravens is done and it's just Eternal Nights, it'll probably be like once a year, maybe once every 9 months, you know.
yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, that's because it gives people time to read and experience and get excited for the next book and all this sort of thing. So yeah, it's better to kind of space it out. I don't have that problem. When I get a book done and it's kind of ready to go, it's a major event. I don't have more sitting. H1's a struggle. So congratulations on being so prolific. Um sort of thing. That's a very good a very good thing. What do you think is the hardest part about writing fantasy and paranormal and science fiction? What's the most difficult thing for you?
The hardest part is the way that I write because I insist on everything being realistic, and my books are very extreme in both directions. And when you're writing the antagonist, because the antagonists they get pages too, like they're not just a mysterious thing that never gets introduced. I have to write the antagonist in a way that makes sense. It's real enough that people can actually maybe even relate a tiny bit, and they're doing horrible things. I have to write these horrible scenes that deal with things like suicide, crucifixion, or just brutal things that the antagonists are doing, and I have to write them in a way that it's organic, not just like, oh, they're crazy bad guys. Like that doesn't work because that's not realistic.
Hmm.
And then in Eternal Nights, one of the hardest things to address was I had to come up with a scientific way of explaining vampires because the vampires are the main characters. They believed that they believed that they were something, and they very quickly realized that they were wrong. And the first question an intelligent person's going to ask is, well, if I'm not this, well, then what the hell am I? So
Hmm.
as they're learning about themselves and how their body works and things like that, I have to find scientific explanations for this because I have to keep it realistic. And so I have to scientifically explain an immortal blood-sucking monster. And I released that explanation throughout the course of multiple books as they're examining themselves, basically.
Hmm. No, that's that's a very interesting problem and conundrum, and I think a lot of people, especially with characters that we're so familiar with, like vampires and zombies, don't necessarily take the time to explain why they're there. They just let it exist because we already know what that means, sort of thing. So you've kind of gone above and beyond in that way. Um,
Because the characters are realistic or have to be realistic and they're intelligent. An intelligent person is going to want to learn about themselves. And they've believed a certain thing for like 900 years. It turns out to be wrong. So if they don't seek to explain themselves, then I think that's a big plot hole because they would naturally want to do that. And that's just part of the journey that they're on.
yeah. No, that is certainly that's it's fascinating. Well, good. This is all amazing. Your books sound awesome. I think, definitely if you're one of those guys who likes to read, I think this stuff is for you. So, that's very good. Why don't you let us know where we can keep up with you online and where we can find your book?
The website they made for me is pretty simple, richardspiegel.com.
Hmm.
Much simpler than the domain name I came up with the website that I was trying to do. And on Instagram, I'm simply Richard Spiegel Books. They're still creating my Facebook page. I don't really have one of those yet. And of course, all of my work is on Amazon. I mean, as long as you know, Google my name,
Yeah.
Amazon search my name, my
Yeah.
website is my name. So
No,
yeah.
very simple. Delightful. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Oh, again, thank you for helping me or having me. That's what I meant to say.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.